And I'm ready to start putting this back together now. All the parts have been thoroughly cleaned and painted up. You notice that I did not get any paint inside these areas where the bearing races have to get pressed in, nor did I get paint in these areas where the U-joints get pressed in. I've got new bearings, new seals, new brake shoes for the parking brakes, new washers for these rear spindles, got new U-joints for the half shaft here. So the first thing I'll do is go ahead and press my bearing races into this rear hub. I'm going to install this outer race first. Kind of get it started. Then I'm going to use the old race. I can set right there and I'll go over to my press and I can push that right on in. Okay, so I'm going to take the old race, set it right on there. Put me a little block across there to press on. Okay, that's seated real nice. And then I'll come back through with a punch and knock this one loose. Okay, and there's new race installed. So now I'll put the inner in, and I'm not going to show you yet. It's going to be the exact same procedure. Both races are in now. One thing I didn't mention, if you're going to use a press and use the old race to push it in there with, you see how the taper is right here. This edge is very thin. You got a bigger shoulder on this side. Make sure this is facing down to press it in. Otherwise, you won't have anything to knock this back out with. Plus, there's a nice little radius right here. So if it's not lined up perfectly, it kind of self-center itself as it goes into that shoulder. But you know, there's only about 1/8 of an inch or less of engagement to where it comes up on here. So with that wide shoulder in there, you turn it over while you've got something to hit your punch on to knock it right out. Now I've got to set up my bearing spacers. This is not a crush sleeve, it's actually just a bearing spacer. And then this is a little shim or adjustable spacer, actually goes on this side. And it'll get sandwiched in between the bearings, just like this. And when it's all together and tightened down, you want between 1 and 8/1000 of in play back and forth here. And the way you do that is with various thickness of shims. All of these in this pack are these things right here in various thicknesses. This one is 103, 97, 139. These are thousandths of an inch, 109. So I believe these are in 6/1000 increments. Okay, to establish the correct shim thickness, I've got to get these bearings in place with the spacers between them. And I'm going to start with the spacer that came out of it when I took it apart. Probably not going to be, you know, exactly the same again, but it might be, you never know. And I kind of made up a little tool to do that with. They sell one that you can use that's probably a lot better than this, but basically I've got a spacer here I'll put that over there. Then I'll put this spacer on here. Then this little guy go down in there. All I'm doing is trying to keep everything centered. So now this will go over here. All this is doing is just keeping it centered on this bolt. This is a 1-inch diameter bolt. I made this piece. I just made all these little pieces. There we go. And then this will come up through here. I can drop this bearing in here. Okay, I don't even have to put a wrench on here. I can already feel there's no in play at all there. So let me take it back apart. And this is a 127. So I'll go to the next thicker shim. Let's see. Looks like this one here is a 133. Just verify that. Yep. Keeps everything centered. Okay, that feels pretty good actually. I need a little bit. Okay, if I zero that right there, we got about 2.5 to 3 thousandths of in play there. So I think that's perfect. The spec calls for 1 to 8 thousandths, and I would rather be on the lower end between 1 and 2 or 3 or 4, somewhere around there. So I think that is just perfect. Now I need to get my parking brakes on here. Okay, that's that part. Now this piece is right under here. Okay, here's where things are going to get changed up a little bit. This is the original trailing arm, and you can see the studs get pushed in from this side, and then they go through all of this assembly, and the nuts end up coming in from here. So the only way you can remove the trailing arm from this assembly is to drive the axle out so you have access to these nuts. I'm doing away with this stock trailing arm, and I've got a suspension kit from Ride Tech that I'm going to be using that improves the suspension geometry and the ride and handling of the car. And I've got a new trailing arm, and in the kit they give you these studs that are going to go through from this side, and then the nuts will bolt on from the back side. So if I ever need to remove this hub assembly from the trailing arm, I just got to remove those 4 nuts from the back side and everything comes apart. I don't have to take the little spindle or axle out of here. So what I'm going to do is just set this right here, set this right on here, drop these down in there. And drive these studs right on down in there. Get them all kind of started good. Okay, I believe that's pretty good. This is just a high quality grease. So I'm going to put a big wad in my hand right there. And then I'm just going to start working it in. See it coming up right there? I'll just go all the way around till it's fully packed. Just put a little film of grease right around the inside of here. Drop my bearing down in there. Got a new seal that goes on there. Okay. Okay, I've got to stick my spacer down in here now. Okay. And on this side, got this little guy that goes on there. That can go on there. Okay, here's this new trailing arm I've got. So it'll go on there just like this. And then 4 nuts will go down there and tighten that on. But I can go ahead and put my spindle through here before I put this on, because now, like I said, these studs are coming out here and the nuts will go through the trailing arm, whereas before on the stock trailing arm, the studs came out from here and you had to put the nuts on the back side, so you would have to assemble the trailing arm to this assembly before you could put the spindle in there. So this was much more convenient. I'll just put a little film of grease around here. All of this will just go right over the top here. And then I'm going to put the flange right on here. And I'm going to go over to my press and try and press the whole thing together. A little tight, but it's going. Okay, now I can pull this off of here. Slide this new trailing arm on. Now I can put my yoke back on there. Okay, put one of my new washers in there. Put the nuts. This gets torqued to 100 foot-pounds. And that pretty much completes the assembly of the passenger side hub assembly. Got new bearings, new seals, new brake shoes on the parking brake there, new trailing arm that I'll be using with my Ride Tech suspension.